Okay, so again, I want to just thank everybody for attending. I wanted to also give you a list of our partners in Tandem Technologies. This is not all of our employees, but just rather the partners that you can also email or ask questions. Most of our email addresses are just our first name and then tandemtechnologiesllc.com. So today we're going to be talking about the Sage 300 year-end procedures, and then we're also going to talk about the Sage 300 payroll and how it works with the workflow analyzer, otherwise known as MWA, which stands for My Workflow Analyzer. And that's a tool that's specifically been put out by Sage to help our payroll and HR clients get the 1094, 1095, 655, and 656 forms filed that are required by the IRS under the new ACA or Affordable Care Act requirements. Today's agenda, we're going to be, let me just get all of these up. Looks like I didn't put them in the right order. So we're going to be talking about important dates that you need to get on your calendar for next year, and I'm going to give you some of those so you're able to write them down. Then we're going to go over the year-end procedures in Sage 300 first. So if you don't have payroll, I wanted to make it so that you didn't have to sit through all of the payroll topics first to go over year-end. If you have payroll, going over the year-end procedures is still going to help you. So don't hang up if you're thinking, oh, I just wanted to get to the payroll, because we will be covering topics for how to close out payroll as well. So it's not just about the general ledger. We're going to discuss the Affordable Care Act timeline, when you have to submit things. We're then going to talk about what the Workflow Analyzer tool is for and how it can help your organization be ready for filing. And then there's some other topics about who and what is required to file. I know a lot of people are asking what is an FTE, which is a full-time equivalent. We're going to discuss that in some detail and give you an example of what an FTE is. Does anybody have any questions before we get started about the topics we're going to cover today?
Karen, another thing I noticed, the screen, I don't know if everybody else is noticing it, your screen's bigger than what's being displayed out to us.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if everybody else is noticing that, because I only can see the Workforce Analyzer. I can't see the last topics on your screen.
You're only seeing Workflow Analyzer tool?
I'm seeing down to Workflow Analyzer. I don't see any lines below that.
Oh, wow. Okay.
To the left, the word important. So maybe you want to personalize your screen to the next resolution smaller. Or if no one else is having this problem, don't worry about me.
Yeah, I'm seeing 1 through 8.
You're seeing 1 through 8?
Yeah, I see 1 through 8.
Okay. Yeah, you should be seeing agenda 1 through 8. If you're not, please let me know. Or you can change your screen resolution on your end, and that might assist.
Try clicking on the screen and using if you have a scroll wheel on your mouse.
Mm-hmm.
Just click on the screen and scroll with your wheel up or down.
No, that's not going to help me. You're talking about other people?
That took care of it, Karen. That's it.
Okay. All right, great. So I'm going to move on to the next topic, which is those dates that I wanted to remind you of. So there's some confusion about, well, what do I owe on what dates to the government? And a lot of people also didn't realize that you need to file the 1095-C to your employees as well. So those have to be sent in with the W-2s to your employees. And some people did not know that, so I wanted to make sure I put that in here and made that announcement. Then your February 29th filings for those forms to the federal government is due by February 29th if you're filing a paper copy. If you are electronic filing the forms, 1094, 1095, W-2s, and W-3 transmittals, then those are due by March 31st, okay? Now, a lot of people want to get all this stuff done all at once, and they just file. So let's talk about why you might want to defer that until what I call the last minute. There are times where when we submit our W-2s to our employees, they come back and they let us know that there's something wrong with the W-2. So while it's fine to submit and get the W-2s printed and out of the way, you may want to wait on some of your filing to the IRS just because there may be changes that need to be made to the W-2s. if you submit a W-2 to the federal government and you need to change it, that means you need to refile your W-2s, and they become a W-2C, which stands for correction. So sometimes it's good to wait. I wasn't really serious about waiting until the very last minute, although I know some people do. But sometimes it's good to wait just a little bit before you get going on that. Okay, let's take a look at Sage 300 year-end. I'm going to go ahead and jump over to my computer where we're going to talk about closing out Sage 300 year-end. I also, if you have changed your name up in the viewer screen, I will be sending over to you our year-end procedures checklist. And it is a really good checklist, so you might want to take a look at changing your name up in the participants section of the join.me, and I will go there now so that you can see it one last time. So if you want to go ahead and change your name, I do have a bunch of documents that I'm going to be sending people, but I do see that there's still some people that are have not changed their names. I see a viewer 17 and a viewer 18. So in that drop-down list of participants, if you don't see your name, and you'd like to receive this material that we're going to be giving to you after today's session, please make sure that you let us know you're here. Okay, so I'm going to jump over to my remote desktop connection and get logged into my server. So we're going to talk about closing the year first of all. One of the first things that you need to do, even if you're not ready to close your year, is go into the Common Services Fiscal Calendar, and you will need to create a new year, okay? So if it's the year 2021 and I'm getting ready to go into 2022, I need to click this new button here, and that will add my new year 2022, and at which point I can then choose that I want to lock everything. So if I'm not ready to post anything to periods in that year, I can lock them, or if I already know I'm going to be accepting things in January, but none of the other months, I can go ahead and lock those columns, and that way people can't be posting things into the future, at least just yet. The other common thing that I want to encourage you to do that happens to people is when they're creating a new year, let's say you're going to be creating the 2016 year, or maybe you're going to be creating the 2017 year, depending upon your fiscal calendar and when it drops. People commonly, as you know, put in dates of January 1, 2015, even though they meant to put in January 1 of 2016. So what I always encourage people to do is go back and lock that previous year, okay? So in this case, you would want to lock the year 2015 if you're creating the new year 2016, and just lock the January period. That way people can't make mistakes and put January 1, 2015 or any other date in January of 2015 when they're entering invoices into the system for the new 2016 year. So this will help keep down on that, because it will pop up a message that basically says that you're not allowed to post into this period and year. The other thing that is a great help at that point is to go over to your company profile, and you can set your warning date range that you allow entries to be made into the past or into the future. So what this is basically saying is that 30 days from today's clock date on your computer, if you try to enter a transaction, so if I try to enter a transaction in January, and let's just say it's January 30th of 2016, this is going to pop up a warning message saying, hey, are you sure you're in the right period and entering the right date for the transaction? So at least it would pop up with a warning message. So that's another way that you can offset some of the problems that you might have when employees are posting transactions into the wrong periods, and that's by setting this warning date range. Now, if you don't have access to the common services, that would probably be an administrative task that you would want to do. The other thing that we're going to be looking at doing is, obviously, when you're closing out the year, you want to make sure that you're running day-end processing, okay? And that should probably be done first, because in many instances, depending upon how you have your inventory control module set up, it determines how it's going to post batches to the general ledger. It also determines how you're going to be costing items. So if you're costing during day end and you're submitting transactions to the subledgers, then via day-end processing, then you definitely would want to run your day-end processing before you close out the year. Now, that's in inventory control. But if you don't have inventory control, but you still have, say, purchase orders, you would still need to run day-end processing, which is in the purchase order module under periodic processing. Okay, so that's for those of you that don't have the inventory control module. You still need to go into PO periodic processing and click on that day-end processing to post those purchase order invoices over into accounts payable. So those are some of the first things that we recommend you do when you're getting ready to close your period or close the year end. You can close periods as well over in this fiscal calendar by locking those columns down, as I was saying before. Okay. And then you can also close specific subledgers as well. So if you, for instance, wanted to close only accounts payable, you could just uncheck all of these other locks so that only accounts payable was closed. So those are some things that you can do that you might not have been aware of. All right. Next order of business, it would be to go in and make sure that all your transactions are posted down for the year in all of the subledgers. So accounts payable, we would want to go into AP transactions and make sure that all of our invoice batch lists are posted, okay, and or deleted. So if you've got some empty batches out here like I do, you probably want to make sure that you delete those and get rid of those empty batches so that you're ready to go. Same thing for payment batch list, adjustment batch lists. You want to go ahead, open those up, make sure there aren't any entries or transactions that need to be posted over to the general ledger, because the assumption is that once you are done with the year, you're probably going to go back over to Common Services Fiscal Calendar and lock it down so that nobody can post additional transactions into that period. But we've still got a little ways to go in getting there. So after you've gone through your AP transactions, AR transactions, inventory control transactions, etc., and posted all of those batches, the next thing that we can do is start talking about the periodic processing that occurs in each module. Now, a lot of this also depends on how you have your accounts payable, accounts receivable, inventory control set up to integrate with the general ledger. So in accounts payable setup, and also all of the other modules have this as well, there's something called GL integration. If you have these set to on request using create GL batch icon, then you would need or want to go into your periodic processing and create your GL batch. Okay, so that's something you should be doing as well if you're not going to be posting the transactions all the way down to the general ledger through clicking on the invoice batch list and posting there. So if it's set to on request using create GL batch icon, okay, even if you go over to invoice batch list and you hit the post button, that's not posting it over to the general ledger, okay, if you have it set to that setting, on request using GL batch icon. That's only posting the transactions down into accounts payable so that you can then pay the invoices or have cut the checks and things of that nature. You would still need to go back in to the AP periodic processing and go ahead and release those batches to general ledger and then post them down over there into the general ledger. Okay. Some other things that we can do at this time of the year is clear our history. Okay, now why might I be clearing my history? Well, if your reports are running slowly, it's taking a long time for reports to load and you know that you're getting low on hard drive space, or you just feel I don't need 20 years of history in my accounting software, this is the time to go and trim those documents out. So in this case, it is not going to clear out anything but fully paid documents, okay, in this case. So if there's open invoices, have no fear. It's not going to be deleting those. So you would just indicate fully paid documents. If you know the specific vendor that you're wanting to clear documents for, you can do that. If you don't know and you want to leave this blank, then you can actually go and put in a date up through range. So if I leave it on this, this is going to remove any fully paid documents for my vendors up through this particular date. I also can choose to rid myself of vendor comments that have expired, or maybe I'm not wanting to keep. Maybe I don't want to keep any 1099 amounts on hand anymore, and in that case I would need to specify the year and the month of the data that I want to get rid of. Now, because 1099 and CPRS, which is the Canadian version of 1099, you would not probably want to do a half year. So if you're going to be doing these, I would probably recommend you did a full, up through a particular year end and not midway through a year, because those are yearly filings. We can also choose to clear our printed posting journals for invoices, payments, and adjustments. So if you know you don't want to see these printed posting journals anymore, or you're done with them, then you can clear these out. Okay, same thing through here. That is a permanent process. Okay, so what does that mean? Anytime I say that's a permanent process, that means it's going to be gone. It's going to be removed from your ability to drill down from the general ledger into those transactions, okay, and bring up history on those. So if you like the ability to drill down from the general ledger to accounts payable or any of the other subledgers for that matter, you might want to think twice about the dates that you're going to be clearing out and the types of transactions and journals that you're going to be clearing out. There's also the ability to delete inactive records, okay, and that also is a permanent move. So if you have vendors that you no longer use and you don't want them in your system, if you have marked the vendor for deletion or as inactive in this case, and as long as they don't have any open transactions, it will allow you to delete those vendors. Same thing on vendor groups, remit-tos, and any recurring payables that might have expired, okay, through these particular inactive dates. Now, does anybody have any questions on how to make a vendor or a group or remit-to inactive? Or do you all feel comfortable with knowing how to mark those records? Okay, let me show you right quick. So if you wanted to remove a vendor, you would need to go in and mark them as inactive. Okay. Now, this is telling me I can't because this vendor has a non-zero balance, but it's this button right here that would allow me to mark this vendor as inactive. Okay. Once you mark a vendor as inactive, they won't show up in the pick list anymore, and you can't post any transactions down like accounts payable, payment batches, and things of that nature. So it's not going to let you inadvertently delete a vendor that has activity on it. Okay, so that's the delete inactive records. There's also the statistical information, so the vendor statistics and the vendor group statistics. Those are located here underneath your vendors and your vendor groups. So if I bring up my statistical information, all of this year-to-date information would go away depending upon what I want to clear out. So a lot of people will clear this at the end of the year, and you can do that by going in here and establishing the year through which you want to delete the statistical information. Okay, and that, again, is available for both vendors and vendor groups. Okay, the next topic is year-end. So when you do a year-end in accounts payable, okay, it's going to reset all your batch numbers, okay, and thus removing all your transaction history for the batches that you are telling it you want to delete. And again, what this means is you're not going to be able to drill down from the general ledger, okay. Same thing here, clear recurring payables, year-to-date statistical information, and clear activity statistics. Clear invoices paid and days to pay counters. So all of these buttons are dangerous, and you need to understand what can happen if you are going to be resetting them and clearing that activity out. Now, do you have to do this? No. You do not have to reset all your batch numbers, okay? Maybe you just want to clear your activity statistics and clear your invoices paid and days to pay counter, okay? If that's all you want to do, you can just run this utility for these features that you select.
On our calendar, just
okay?
So,
if you don't want to do any of these options, you don't have to. It's not mandatory. They call it year-end because that's when you would typically do these things, is when your company year-end comes about. So if it's in the end of March, then you would do these things at the end of the March. We don't recommend that you do these types of functions any other time other than your corporate year-end. Okay, any questions on accounts payable and clearing history and year-end procedures? The other thing that we have is our 1099 electronic filing that needs to be done. Okay, so if you're doing 1099s, or the equivalent of that would be the Canadian CPRS, if any of our Canadian customers are on today's session. These would be done, again, at year-end and at the same time as your W-2s. So the 1099s and the W-2s are due at the same time. Let's move on to accounts receivable because we have a lot of similarities here. First of all, you would want to make sure that if you've got your general ledger integration set up to post batches to the GL when you create them here, then you would want to make sure that you are creating those GL batches and pressing this button and going through that process before you close your year out. If you're charging any interest, you can create those interest batches, but that's something that if you're not charging interest or have any interest profiles set up, you wouldn't need to do that before your year end. Clear history, again, this is very similar to the accounts payable. Okay, so you're deleting batches and things of that nature here. So again, you want to be careful. This is going to be clearing fully paid invoices from your customers and any customer comments and then other data. Clear statistical information, same thing. So instead of vendor statistics, it's customers and customer groups. If you also have the national account module and you want to clear that data, okay, and any salesperson statistics or item statistics can be cleared out. There's also the year-end, okay, that's done here. But before running the year-end, you may want to do things like create your write-off batches, creating any retainage batches if you're using retainage in accounts receivable, and your interest batches. The other thing that we have is the ability to delete your inactive records. So again, if you have a customer that you no longer have any open invoices for or open transactions, you can delete those inactive customers, but you have to mark them as inactive just as I showed you in the accounts payable vendor area. At that time, you're ready to do your year-end here. Again, if you only want to opt to clear activity and statistics, you can do so, okay? You do not have to reset all your batch numbers to 0. So what does that mean, reset all batch numbers? Okay, what that means is over in, let's just go into your accounts receivable batches here, and we're going to show these. So you're going to see you've got batch number 1, which probably takes a long time to get up all the way up to the top, and then my last batch is number 36 here. So what would happen if I clicked on that reset batch numbers in any of my modules, it would make it so that all of these batches would completely disappear from my list, okay? And I would go back to having batch number 1 on January 1, 2016, okay? So you don't have to do this procedure, and in fact, I usually don't recommend it because you're going to lose all your drill down capabilities from the general ledger if you do that reset all batch numbers. Now, if you've got, like I said, 15, 20 years of data in there, you may want to consider doing something like that. And feel free to reach out to us so we could discuss the proper way to do things of that nature if you're going to do so. Over in Common Services, there's really not that much to do over here other than probably reconciling your bank, and then you can opt for clearing history over here as well. So if you wanted to get rid of bank transactions up through a particular date, you can do that. Okay. Over in inventory control, as I said before, you want to make sure you're doing periodic processing, okay? And then you can also clear history in the inventory control module as well, just like the other modules. So we're clearing transaction history, statistical information, contract prices for vendors and customers. So these are all things that are completely optional. You do not have to do. It's also the appropriate time to think about deleting items that you've made inactive or any other type of activities regarding posting information to GL, like the account sets and the categories. If you're no longer using some of those account sets and categories, it's sometimes best to go ahead and delete those out so that people don't use them or make the mistake of using one of the account sets or categories that you don't want them to use. You can only delete an inactive location, of course, if there's no inventory in that location. Same thing if you're using the bill of materials that comes with Sage Inventory Control, you can opt to delete any inactive bill of materials that you have. Again, that would be something that you would probably want to coordinate with the manufacturers that are responsible for keeping drawings and things on file to make sure that you're not deleting bills of material unnecessarily that they might need to refer back to later for a build specification. Any questions so far that anybody has on inventory control, accounts receivable, or accounts payable? Okay. Let's move on to order entry. So in OE, it's just a matter of, do you want to clear any historical batches here, transactions, sales history? Now, this is probably the most popular one out of all of our clear history functions that people would do because maybe their sales reports are running slower and they've just determined, look, we don't need 15 years of sales order history on our customers. Now, obviously, if you're tracking things like warranty, lifetime warranties and things of that nature, you probably don't want to delete your OE history because you might be deleting, in this case, transactions that relate to those documents that you need for the customer to look them up to see when they purchase something, for instance, especially if they have warranties. So we can print out or clear our printed posting journals, and we can do that for invoices, credit notes, and shipments both. Or you can just choose, I only want to do it for invoices, for instance. Or maybe you don't want to do invoices, but you want to do shipments. So you've got some choices here on clearing history in OE. And same thing in purchase orders. So we have the ability to clear history in PO as well. And so it's very similar, obviously, to order entry. Okay. We're definitely here if anybody wants to discuss any ramifications of clearing history out. I do recommend, if you're going to clear history, that you use the same dates for all of the history that you're clearing in all of the modules, unless you've got a specific rationale for keeping data in one particular module, say, longer. An example of that might be if you're wanting to trim off OE data, but you're going to leave all the other data alone in purchase orders, inventory control, accounts receivable, and accounts payable, for instance. So those would be areas where if you wanted to just delete OE data but leave everything else intact, you certainly could. But what we find is easiest is that if you choose a cutoff date, if you're going to delete data from all of the modules and use the same cutoff date for each of the modules, it makes it much cleaner for going back and doing any kind of research, because you're not having to remember what date you used for the purchase order module versus what date you used for order entry and things of that nature. Okay, in payroll, there's really not a lot here. We don't want to delete payroll information and documentation, but we can delete things like employee history, terminated employees, inactive earnings and deductions, and inactive taxes. Now, the inactive taxes, it's not going to delete things like the U.S. FIT, any kind of federal or state taxes. This inactive taxes is referring most likely to the additional taxes that you can set up on your own that you want to make inactive. When you delete employee history, there are some rules that you need to understand about deleting employee history through a certain date range, because we are required by law to keep employee data on hand for a number of years, and it does vary, but I think the standard is 7 years. Do we have any CPAs in the crowd that can confirm that? No? Okay, so make sure before you delete employee history data that you do find out what the law is for your state, and nonprofit organizations do differ from profit organizations, so you might want to check into that as well. We can do things like find duplicate serial numbers, and that might be the time to do that, because if you're printing W-2s, you might want to understand if you've got any duplicate serial numbers in the system. Other than that, those are the only things that you need to do for payroll. There are a few extra things for the Canadian side, but I won't be covering those today. If you're one of our Canadian clients and you are on today's session, you're going to be treated special today, and that we will be doing a special session just for you, one-on-one, to cover those areas. So payroll is pretty cut and dry. You don't want to delete anything as a general rule unless you just know the number of years that you're going to be deleting. But there's no formal closing procedure that has to be followed there. In the project and job costing module, you can go in and clear history in this module as well. So there's a lot more detail in here. Again, I wouldn't recommend clearing out your posting journals and some of the documents, because, again, you're not going to be able to drill down into those transactions from the general ledger. So anytime you see clear history and it's talking about the posting journals and documents, you might want to take a second look at what's going to happen if you do those clearings. And I'm happy to speak to that further if anybody would like any additional information on that. Okay, so that wraps up our year-end close for the subledgers. Let's talk about the general ledger now. So there's a little more to do in the GL. And one of the things that you're going to find, especially if you're new to Sage 300, is on January 1 when you walk in, or actually it'll probably be January 4th for most people this year. When you walk into work, it's probably going to give you a message that it can't create a batch or it can't post something to the general ledger from one of the subledgers. Well, remember, the first thing you need to do is go into the Common Services Fiscal Calendar, create your new year in that module, and then everything will be able to be entered. Now, you still will not be able to post to the general ledger until you've created the new year in the GL. Okay, so it's going to let you create an entry in the new year because you put the fiscal calendar year up to 2016. But if you hit the post button and you have it set to automatically post the batch to the general ledger and you haven't created your new year yet, it is not going to allow you to post that batch down into the GL, and it will create an error batch. I promise. So make sure that you have created your new year before you're posting batches down. Now, if you do not want to post batches to the general ledger, but you do need to post your entries in accounts payable and you don't want to get that error batch, then you need to go over to your AP setup, go into your general ledger integration, and I would encourage you to change this to on request using Create GL Batch icon until such time you are ready to post the accounts payable, accounts receivable, and other subledgers into the general ledger. So you can change this temporarily, and then you can change it back when you are ready to start posting your batches. Just please be warned that if you do change the GL integration to on request using GL Batch icon, before you change it back, you will need to do your release here first underneath AP periodic processing. Now, a lot of people say, well, Karen, if I close out my general ledger year by creating a new year, what's going to happen to, can I still close my year? Can I still put in all of my adjusting entries into the year that I've basically closed out? The answer is yes. Okay, creating a new year will make sure that, first of all of the entries that you enter into the previous year will be properly recorded, and any entries that are revenue expense type entries will also create an entry to the retained earnings account or the owner's equity, depending upon what you're calling it. So closing the year or creating the new year is not, there's no detriment to doing it. Okay, you can still post entries into that year as long as you have your fiscal calendar unlocked to allow those entries into the previous year. And you can go in and lock the fiscal calendar and unlock it at your leisure. So if there's entries that you were going to be making on a particular day, you could enter them all at once and then post them into the previous year. Okay? There are really no hard closings in Sage 300. So your fiscal calendar can be open all year long, and you can post entries into it at any time you want. If you are not wanting to post entries into a period that you're considering closed, then you need to go into the fiscal calendar and make sure that people can't post entries into a prior year. So when I close my year or create my new year in this process, it's going to create all the new accounts for my year 2016. Okay, that's what makes it possible then for you to post batches from all of the other subledgers into the GL. And until you do this process, as I said, no GL accounts will be created, and therefore you won't be able to post batches from AP and AR or any other subledger until you have created the new year. And creating the new year does not hurt anything. Okay, it's not a hard close. All the dates are open. All the fiscal periods are open until you go in and lock them. Okay, what else it does is it will change my fiscal year to the new year. And you can go in and check that in your GL setup by going to the GL options and then going over to the posting screen, and it'll tell you what year you are in currently. The other thing that you want to make sure you take a look at before you press that Create New Year button, okay, is going in and making sure that you have set to keep the number of years of fiscal sets and the transaction detail that you want. Because how I have it set up right now, it's going to trim off everything but the last 3 years for me. Okay, so you might want to check this. Most people have this in here, okay, because that's what the default is for the premium edition. If you have any of the other editions of Sage 300, Advanced or Standard, then your number of years for this is at the max, I believe, going to be 10. Okay, so if you have the premium edition, you can keep more years than that, but any other edition is going to be 10 years. The other thing that we want to make sure we have turned on, if you're not done with your previous year, is the Allow Posting to Previous Years button. Okay? If this is not turned on, you will not be able to post transactions into the previous year once you've created your new year. The other thing in General Ledger is deleting any inactive GL accounts, transaction history, but again, if you do so, you won't be able to drill down from those entries because they're basically not going to show up anymore in your batch listing. We can also choose to reset batch numbers, but again, if you do that, it's going to remove everything from those batch windows, okay, and what I'm talking about is these windows here. None of these batches would be here, which means if I wanted to open it up and look at it and then drill down using my little arrow keys here into the originating batch, I would not be able to do that if I'm going to be using the clear history button and or my period in maintenance. Okay, so be careful about clearing history and your period in maintenance and resetting these batch numbers because it will remove everything out of the system. Okay, any questions on closing out the year? I know I kind of just ran through it really quickly, but we've got a lot of information to cover for payroll here as well. Any questions at all? Okay. If you have a question, you can post it up in the window of the join.me meeting, and I'll try to look for those towards the end of the session. So if you don't feel comfortable voicing any questions, you can just type them in the chat window, and the chat window is the circle in the middle. It was next to the participants, and you can type in any questions that you want there. All right, the next area that we're going to talk about is the ACA. So let's talk about this timeline. And for those of you that were on the session on Tuesday that we had regarding the SAGE HRMS modules, you may have seen this slide. I think it's a good slide because even though I feel like in many terms the ACA requirements have really snuck up on us, this has been around before the year 2010, basically. So we've known it's been coming for a long time, but I think many employers did not know that it was coming, and many employers still don't know what they have to do to report and what the qualifications are for reporting. I am hoping to help you with a lot of this today, okay? So I'm going to walk you through how to use the my workflow analyzer that comes with the new SAGE Payroll version 7.2. If you do not have the version 7.2 Payroll yet, you need to schedule that time with me. We are not calling people to schedule it. We're expecting them to get in touch with us to let us know what dates and times work for them and their staff. So please, if you have not installed version 7.2 Payroll or you would like us to do it, you need to get on the calendar. It does need to be done before December 31st of this year. So these timelines are just something that I thought was important because even though we feel kind of caught off guard by some of the new requirements, they have been, shall we say, brewing for the last 5 years. So the Workflow Analyzer is a tool that was developed by SAGE to help you analyze your payroll data so that you can understand what, if any, 1094, 1095, A, B, or C forms that you need to file. And it provides a modeling, if you will, so that you can analyze whether you want to pay or play, and gives you the ability to be in compliance by offering you the proper reporting that the IRS has established for your employees that you're covering and you need to report on. So let's talk for a minute about who's required to file. Now, I'm expecting that after I get to the last comment line here that some of you will probably hang up the phone. And that's fine. You can feel free to do that, but I want you to wait until we've talked at least about what an FTE is, okay, before you hang up. Because a lot of people are going to say, well, I have fewer than 50 employees, so I'm not eligible and I don't need to do this. But wait, okay, there's more. And that's where this FTE comes into play. And so I want to make sure that we define what a full-time equivalent is. A lot of new acronyms here. So FTE is just one of them, and then we've got ACA, and I'm sure there's others that are coming or are already out there that I just haven't mentioned in today's webinar. Anyways, I'm sure you all can read, so I'm not going to, go on to what the slide is. But this is what I could think of as the best example for what a full-time equivalent employee is. So even if you have part-time workers, they may still qualify as a full-time equivalent. So you need to be careful about how you're classifying your employees. We're also going to talk further about some of these FTE definitions as we're filling out the ACA, because there's also something called hours of service for not only your salaried employees, but also those that are just, doing hourly type pay. There's pay types that have to be defined to help determine if somebody is an FTE, and we'll try to cover some of those as well. Please understand that this is not going to be an all-inclusive course today on how and what do you need to do and do you need to file. So I think for purposes of just covering myself and Tandem Technologies as a whole, if you're in doubt about anything that is involved around filling out or filing the ACA, I strongly encourage you to contact a CPA firm or an employer-based firm to get some of those answers. We do have a lot of knowledge in our company in Tandem. We do have some HR specialists that can help answer some of your questions, but again, it's something that you should really be responsible for and find out if your company is going to be responsible for reporting. And today's session is not going to cover every single aspect of what might be a scenario for your company. So this little grid here, I guess, for better definition, is just something I developed that would help define some employees and determining, because by looking at this, I might be tempted to just say, well, I only have 6 full-time employees. But in reality, we can see here that the employer in this situation has 7, okay, because it's a matter of dividing all of the hours and getting to the next number. Okay, so what reports need to be submitted? So there's also a Section 655 report and a 656 report, depending upon your coverage and minimum essential coverage to the IRS, whether you'll need to be filling these particular forms out. This is kind of a fun slide. It helps you determine if you're offering health insurance coverage to your employees. Depending upon where you fall here, what do you need to do? So these are just some scenarios that are brought up so that you know what form to file, B or C or Part 3. And I know, again, it can all be very confusing, okay? But make sure before you decide that, no, I don't need to file, that you have properly defined what your full-time equivalent or full-time employees are, because you may end up finding and being surprised that you are needing to file. Okay. So on the ACA form, if you are still with me and you are wanting to find out more, we're going to get into the details of what data is needed to fill in these forms. So this is just some of the information, okay? Some of this is going to be coming from, if you have the Sage HRMS module, some of it would come from that module, okay? If you don't have that module, you will be required to fill in some of this information manually, okay? For instance, when you get to your eligible covered employee dependents, that would be information that would already be housed in your HRMS software, and therefore it would auto-populate. If you don't have that information because you don't have that module, then you have to fill that in either manually or you can do an import of that data. Okay, so you can import data, and I will be showing you some of those import templates after a little bit today. So let's go to and see the ACA in action. I'm going to close down my Sage 300 because you don't need it open to do what we're going to do. I am first going to go into my Workforce Analyzer, and that is a new icon. I'm going to show you where it is just so you can see it. It's probably under your Sage icons here, but it's in my Workflow Analyzer for Sage 300. Okay, so that's where it resides. It's a separate install. It is not included with the Payroll install. Okay, so if you do not see this in your menu structure, it's a separate install. It can also be installed just on the workstation as long as that workstation has ties to and is able to log into Sage 300. Okay, so I'm going to close this down so you can see it loading, because I want you to see that you're actually logging in to your Sage 300 data. So it's going to be fetching data from Sage 300, so therefore the computer that you install that Workflow Analyzer on, it does need to have the ability to access Sage 300 already. So that would mean you would need to do a workstation installation. The first area of business that we need to cover in here is how do you want the payroll information to be obtained from your Sage 300? Okay. Now, most people will choose these defaults that are already listed here. See these little radio buttons? So most of the time, that's probably what you're going to be using, unless you are using class codes to help you define codes for salaried employees and things of that nature. So if you want to go back and create a class code and assign that to your employees based upon if they're salaried employees or what type of employee they are, you can do that. Okay. You also, if you're going to do that, you may want to take a look at the coverage codes that are on the IRS website so that you can go in and put in the right class codes and then categorize your employees into those codes. And I will be giving you some of those websites here in just a little bit. And I also have a lot of the documents that you're going to need in order to fill out the 1095-C form and the 1094-C form. So I will make sure that I pass all of that information on to you so that you have those documents as well. So we're going to opt for the use hours from payroll. But as you can see, we've got some other options we could choose here. So if you were using those class codes for salaried employees in payroll, I would just select the codes that have 40 hours of service assigned by default. So that's if you're using the class codes over in your payroll. But we're just going to use our hours. And if you're not sure, leave it on these defaults, okay? Because in the My Workflow Analyzer, it's going to use the job titles if you've got them to map the salaried employees. Okay, so you do have that option here. Once I get that information, I can hit Save and then open my Workflow Analyzer. Okay, so this is our home screen, and you can always go back to the home by clicking on the little button right here. If we're going to go into Setup, you've got a couple ways you can go there. You can either click on the button here, or you can go down here and click on Setup in this box. This is the first area that you want to do. Okay, you're not going to be able to get to your analysis until you fill in and do your setup here. So let's go ahead and go to our setup. Now, some of these boxes, I'm going to try to help explain what they are today. But again, I am not the end-all, be-all of information, and I could be wrong on some of this, so I want to make sure that you understand that not everything I say could be accurate, and you should be referring to proper documentation on the irs.gov website to understand the form specifically. The first area of information is talking about the employer benefits, and you're going to be required to put in this detail about your employer and the medical benefit plans from Sage 300 that you have. Now, there are some things that you have to do in Sage 300 Payroll before your benefit plans would show up here in this list. Okay, I will tell you what that is, and this is not going to be in any of the documentation, so you may need to write this down. For each plan where it qualifies as a health or employer-provided health insurance offer to your employees, you would need to go in to the employer tab of the earning type or earnings and deductions type, okay, and make sure that you select employer-provided health care coverage under that tab. So again, that's in the payroll module under earnings and deductions, and then it's under the employer tab for the deduction for the health insurance, and you want to make sure you select the W-2 reporting and make sure it says employer-provided health care coverage. Okay, that's going to be in your Sage 300. Without that, none of your plans will show up here in this benefits list. Okay, and do that before you run your workflow analyzer because you can't do it after they won't show up. I've already tried that. So make sure you select it first and then come back in and run your workflow analyzer. There's no harm in opening the workflow analyzer without doing it, but if you're wanting to start the process, you will need to do that first. But if you're wanting to just come in, take a peek, and see what this is about and what kind of information is required, then you definitely want to do that first. But you don't have to if you're just looking around. The first thing that we need to put in here is your current federal corporate tax rate. Now, if you're not sure what that is, okay, it is based upon your company earnings, and you will need to know what your corporate tax rate is, and it does vary based upon the revenues generated by your company. So you'll want to make sure you go out and find out what that is. If you don't know, if you've got a CPA that you use, you may want to refer to them for some help. But you do need to know what your tax bracket is. All right, the next area is understanding if you as an employer are providing benefits with what's called minimum essential coverage with minimum value, okay? So if your company is offering health care that meets the ACA requirements, then you want to select yes. Otherwise, you're going to select no. So if you don't have at least one plan that meets the minimum essential coverage as defined by the ACA requirements, then you want to select no. If you are not sure what minimum essential coverage is, you can go out to, let me get up my little website here. Oops, I just passed it. My apologies. There is a website out here. It's called cms.gov, okay? This is the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, and it does provide a definition of what minimum essential coverage is under the Affordable Care Act. Okay, it's quite a good little article. So that is a website that I recommend you write down, cms.gov. You can actually then go into their little search box and type in here minimum essential coverage, and it will bring up this document right here that I have on screen. Okay, so that's the first area. Then we get into the benefits, and again, you're going to be selecting all the benefits that you have established in Sage 300 first, okay, as being those that qualify under the minimum essential coverage plan. The offer of coverage code, okay, this is just an alphanumeric listing. You will need to pick a coverage code, and so now you're probably thinking, well, how do I know what my coverage code is, and which one of these do I need to fill in? Again, there is a document out here. This is and I will be giving this to you as long as you've put your name into our attendee list. I will make sure that you get a copy of this form. This is actually the 2015 instructions for the 1095 and 1094C forms, and those coverage codes are listed here. Okay, so those will help you determine what you need to put in on that box. It will need to be filled in. The next thing that you need to do is uncover what your lowest cost self-only minimum value coverage plan is. So you're going to be putting in the healthcare plan, and in this case I only have one plan, but if you have multiple plans, you're going to find the lowest cost self-only minimum value coverage plan that your organization offers. Okay? So if you're not sure what that is and your offer of coverage code isn't quite defined and helping you understand what that is, you do need to know which plan it is that offers the minimum coverage. At this point, we put in what the employee contribution is for the benefit plan that we've defined. And this, again, is just the smallest dollar amount that the employee has to contribute to the plan. This is what your employer contribution of monthly premium is, and again, it's a minimum. So these are going to be your lowest costs that you're paying as an employer, and that's what goes in here. So you're going to be entering the monthly employer contribution. Applicable section 4988 of the Safe Harbor Code. Okay, this more codes that we have to enter in here. This alphanumeric list is just obtained directly from the 1095C form. It's just a list of the Safe Harbor codes, but if you don't know what those are, again, I'm going to be sending you this document from the IRS, and all of those Safe Harbor codes are defined here in this document. So here's our 2A, 2B, okay. So we can just put in something here, 2A. Now, if the employer provided self-insurance coverage, you can check this box. Now, I don't know how many of you out there actually do this, but what it means is that you as an employer are providing the insurance coverage for your employees. I would say that probably 90% of you or more don't do that because, first of all, it's very expensive, but it also does let the employer control the cost for the coverage. But anyways, you probably would not be checking that box, okay, for the employer-provided self-coverage. All right, up at the top, we've got the employer benefits. Then we get into the setting up the regulatory period. So this is the first page of our setup. We're going to move on to the regulatory periods and kind of get into what defining these are. So this is really what specifies the start date of your health insurance plans that you're reporting on, okay? So if, for instance, your plan dates start at a particular time for the plan year, that's what you're putting in here is your measurement. So this is an ongoing period, and it's used to measure and determine the employee's full-time or part-time status. So we have a standard period, and this is what everybody falls into after they've been there for a standard year. But they want you to define when does your standard year start, okay? So new employees are going to be placed in what's called the initial measurement period, okay? And existing employees are placed in the standard measurement period. So any new employees would be matched up against this, and then that's how it would know if they've fallen into that coverage area, which is going to be reported on later in another part of this document. So this is your measurement start date. Then you've got what's called an administration duration, and that's the period that's used to enroll your eligible employees in health care benefits and to update the employee status as either full or part-time. Okay, so if usually after 3 months somebody has determined whether they're going to be full or part-time, you've got that administrative period to make changes to that employee. So you're just indicating here what that is and how long you take to do that. Then we also have something called variable hour employees. Now, this also refers to seasonal employees, but if, for instance, let's say you have a college student that's working for you year-round, but their schedule fluctuates so much that you can't determine how many hours they're really working for you, then this is what you would be filling in here to determine where the variable employees fall into determining if they're ACA compliant with your policies. So we've got this measurement start date and then the measurement duration. So if, let's say, you have a variable employee and they're put on a 6-month period of time for measurement, you can use a measurement of up to 12 months if you want. And if you do that, then you can use an administrative period up to 2 months. But this is just letting you determine if your new variable hour employees are full-time employees without being subject to penalties. So that's what basically this is for. So after the 12 months that they've been there, they would then turn into what we call a standard employee. It would fall underneath the standard measurement policies. I know all of this is a little bit confusing. Again, I'm just going to encourage you to, read the documents that we're going to give you today to help understand what some of these measurement periods are, or regulatory periods. Employee service hours. So this is referring to all of the different pay types that are qualified as an earning. And there is a list of these on that IRS publication that I've been showing you. So again, that'll be covered in there. But basically, it's the hours of service that an employee is working for you. And this includes any salaried employees, because it makes the assumption, obviously, if you've got a salaried employee, that they're most likely working 40 hours for you, so you would want to include them. And it also does include any sick pay, vacation pay. So all of those things count as service or hours of service to the employee. Okay. Any questions on that so far? Anything? Okay, this is where we're going to get into the payroll history. And we can use the payroll history from our HR and payroll program. Now, if you don't have HR, of course, it's not going to grab everything from that it needs to fill in the form. If you have the payroll program, it will be grabbing the relevant information from your Sage 300 payroll. You can also import payroll history, okay, from a CSV file. I do have those templates, okay, and I will be passing some of those templates on to you a little bit later. So this is what some of the forms look like, the template forms that you can fill out to use to import data in. So we then get into the employee ACA settings, and this is in direct reference to you selecting whether the employee is receiving a subsidy. A subsidy would be if an employee is getting subsidized state health insurance, okay? So if they're using the health insurance marketplace or healthcare.gov, it notifies employers if employees receive subsidies. So you're just indicating here that, yes, they would get subsidies, or no, they're not. Variable hour means, again, that you're checking this box for new employees for whom you can't determine what the employee is reasonably expected to work in order to qualify as a FTE, which is the full-time equivalent. So if they're a variable employee, then you would want to make sure you check that. Now, the health care benefit, because I only have the one health care plan, you would want to just select the health care plan here from this drop-down list. And this, again, is defined by your HR benefit plan for your core health care insurance plan. So, in other words, you wouldn't want to select dental or eye care here or flexible spending accounts as benefit plans. You would want to select the one that is your health care, your core health care. So if you don't see your benefit in this drop-down, because there is a drop-down even though you can't see it because I only have one benefit plan in my Sage 300 sample data, but if you don't see the plan in that drop-down, you're going to need to go back into your Sage 300 payroll, as I said, and mark that plan as an employer-provided health care coverage. Okay, and that's, again, done in the in the payroll setup earnings and deductions. Once you've got all of this information in here, okay, for all of your employees, and you've selected all of these plans and what they are, you will want to save this. Okay, that saves it so that when you come back later, you can go grab the data without having to go through all of these steps that we just went through again. So that was set up. We can go back to our home, at which case we can go to our analysis now, or we can either go to analysis here or go up to the top and click on analysis here. At this point, it's going to give us our dashboards and allow us to determine whether we want to do the pay or play. Okay. This is also where we can import data into the system for our benefits. So it's where we put our employee information. But this is what the My Workforce Analyzer looks like. So this is just basically defining your payroll history source and then putting it into action here. Let's talk briefly about the employee information. We can first of all export all of this information out. So if you want to analyze it or look at it, all of that information is here on your employees. You'll notice that it's giving us the information about our employer coverage and the employee contribution, if there are any. So we have our benefits area. There's the affordability tab. Okay, so that's saying the affordable coverage assessment by month. Now all of mine say NA. Because I haven't filled in all of the information and the employees haven't, I just don't have all of my information current here. Because this is for a stability period, April 1 to March 31, 2016, and I don't have those years in my data, so it's not showing up. If anything is subsidized, it would show up here. So if I go back to my other area for my benefits, I can see that I have somebody in here that's subsidized. It would be on my other window, but the subsidized person would show up here, and then any of the variable by hour, okay, would show up here. And these are in here because of what I chose back when I was doing my setup. The pay or play window, this is just basically helping you understand if you want to either pay the penalties for determining if you're going to have to file, but it just helps you measure what that expense could be or will be if you don't. Right now, from what I'm understanding, the penalty for not filing is $3,000 per employee. So it's not a small amount if you're not filing properly. Let's go back out of here. Any questions on this analyzer? There's some things in here like ALE determination. That's in reference to, you know, if you're a larger employer or not. Larger as in over 100 employees.
Karen?
Yep.
This is Robin. In the update that you did for us, should I have that workforce analyzer, or is that something I still have to install?
Yeah, it's on your server, but we can install it on your workstation too, Robin.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's an individual install, and we just need to get it installed on your workstation.
Okay, I did notice that payroll update says not registered. Is that an issue?
So when you're logging in, it's telling you that you don't have it registered?
Yes.
Okay, that is a known bug. You're not the first customer that is getting that. So if you go into your Sage 300 License Manager, you should see it in there, and it probably says that it's not activated, but I do know we activated it.
It just says unregistered.
Yeah, And so Sage is going to be issuing a product update. They're telling us in December, which to me is now. But they do know that it's a problem.
Oh, okay.
And they're hoping to have a hot fix out anytime, or I should say they're telling us a product update. So that means I have to install a product update in order to get that to go away.
Oh, okay.
But no, I did register it.
Yeah, I
it's
see
activated, and even, if you get beyond the 30-day window that it's probably warning you about, it should still work.
Okay.
So it sounds kind of scary, but it's not.
Okay, but so I just need to download the Workforce Analyzer to my desktop.
It's already downloaded. It's on your server. We just need to install it on your workstation.
Got it. Okay.
Yep. Good questions. Yeah, so if any of the rest of you end up getting you do not have a license to use this product or your product is not registered, that is a known issue with Sage. So if we've installed it already and you're still getting that pop-up box whenever you log into Sage, just know that it's a known issue. Okay, I'm going to go back to our forms. And this is where we can go in and generate our forms. And in this case, I can only choose 2015, even though my data in my sample company is 2020. Okay, so we're not going to get a lot of data in here. So we're going to tell it to use the Forms Wizard to set the default for employees. And this is our Forms Wizard. So I'm just going to step through what I'm going to put in here, because I don't care right now really what I put in here. You will care, okay? But I don't right now. So I'm just kind of stepping through this so you can see it. Okay, so let's see what I can get here with my forms. So these are the actual forms, okay? So we need to fill in all of this information here that's not already coming over from Sage 300. So all of this information you can fill in for Part 1, Part 2, and Part 3, okay? Then you've got the 1095C, which this is the part that goes to the employees, okay? And these also need to be filled in, and this is per employee. Now, this is where I'm probably going to hear lots of moaning and groaning. But I do want to let you know that this data can be imported into the system, okay? And we can import it with these spreadsheets that I have right here. So if you would like a copy of this spreadsheet, I'm happy to send it. I actually have, this is a template sample, but I also have a blank template that's ready to go with the information. So if I need to send over one or both of these, I'm happy to do it. Just let me know if you want the template, because I'm happy to send it over. Now, you might be thinking, well, why isn't this information coming over from Sage 300? Why do I have to type in here all of the names of my covered individuals? So for each employee, right now I'm on Alan Jason Acosta. I'm filling in the dependents that are eligible under his plan. And this is something that has to be done, and this is something that would be done by the Sage HRMS program if you had it. Okay, so there are sections of this ACA reporting that are not getting populated by Payroll, because Payroll is not responsible for keeping this type of information. Payroll doesn't track your dependents. Only an HR system would track dependents. And that's why we've done the 2 webinars that we've done, so that you guys can kind of understand the differences between not having Sage HRMS and having a full Sage HRMS with your Sage 300 Payroll. So it all seamlessly works together to pull this information so that you can get it on reports. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and just get out of this. So that is the My Workflow Analyzer. And at this point in time, I'm going to go back to my PowerPoint slides and just tell you that there's a lot of other benefits to having the HRMS solution hooked with your Sage 300. If it's something that you're interested in learning about, please feel free to reach out to us. We are a qualified Sage HRMS specialist. I also want to encourage you, if you're needing any assistance, we are here to help. You can go out to our website. We have lots of blog articles out there that cover topics that are important to you, including stuff on Sage HRMS and the new ACA reporting requirements. And as I said before, we'll also have this video put up as well. At this time, I'd like to open it up to any questions that anybody has, but I also want to let you know that you can call our support line. This is a toll-free number. Just go for option 2, and that'll ring you into the next available consultant. Okay? So I'm going to turn off the recording at this time, and I'd like to just open up the session for anybody that has any questions about today's topics and things that we have covered.